how to strengthen the international role of the European Union in the framework of the Conference of the European, of the Future of Europe. So that's why it's so important to bring the perspective of the European External Action Service and how to strengthen the role, how the European External Action Service could improve or could advance towards this objective. So that's why, thank you very much. We have here the opportunity to bring this perspective. Thanks for Alexandros Giannis, who is a senior European Union diplomatic and currently working as Deputy Head of Strategic Policy Planning in the European External Action Service in Brussels, where he also worked in the past with Javier Solana, the first High Representative. He had different posts also with Ashton, and also he also worked with the European Union in Somalia and with the UN in Kosovo. He has also been associate professor at the Fletcher School of University in Boston, visiting a scholar at the School of International and Public Affairs of Columbia University in New York. And he also holds a PhD in international relations from Geneva University. So again, thank you very much, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for also talking about the past a bit, about me. But today our discussion is going to be about the future, I hope, as this is the, I think, in the minds of all of us now. Thank you for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be with you, even in this virtual way, the way our modern world is operating now. I see you are wearing a mask. Let's say we are not out of the woods, as we say, and we all know the issues, but none of us knows when things will get really better. I was wondering also, as you were speaking, that of course I'm speaking in English, all of you there, and I was following a bit briefly the previous session now as I joined. You were speaking in Spanish. And you know, one of the major innovations of the Conference of the Future of Europe, technologically, if you want, before we go to other innovations, the political ones, is that the digital platform that serves as the hub of interaction with the European citizens is basically powered by a very sophisticated artificial intelligence mechanism that translates everything into all the languages of the European Union. I guess, but of course I don't know, that we are not far from the day that I will be speaking in any language I choose to do, and automatically there will be an artificial intelligence translation for all of you in any language you choose to follow me. And all this will be reliable and instant. This is part of the brave new world we are all entering into, and part of the challenges I think that we are discussing when we talk about the future of Europe, when we talk about external action, when we talk about the Europe and the world. Technology, modernity, if you want, is one of the biggest challenges of our times, and how to deal with them will, I think, define not only our future, but also who will be the winners, the losers of the future, and how we're going to live. This is just some introductory general remarks. Before I make some introductory comments about the Conference on the Future of Europe and about the European Union external action and EU in the world, hoping that after that we can have a discussion, and just to put out from the very beginning that the whole idea of the Conference on the Future of Europe is to listen. If you want, one of the political innovations of this exercise is that this is a bottom-up, citizens-based initiative. This may sound in a way commonplace. We live in democracies, and increasingly participatory democracies, enabled also by technology, with the challenges and the opportunities that this brings. But at the same time, there is a history, as we know, in the European Union, in which we can, most of us agree, that has been defined by what we call a top-down process over the last 70 years. Increasingly, of course, more democratic, increasingly more participatory, also with all the major institutional innovations that have taken place over previous periods of institutional and constitutional changes in the treaties of the European Union. I'm talking about the greater role of the European Parliament that has only improved over time. And of course, I'm talking about greater transparency in the workings of the European Union. So we talk about a long process of transformation that is entering, in a way, another phase, experimenting with the idea of participatory democracy, with the idea of greater deliberative democracy, if you want. And the essence of this is that this, if you want, experiment of the Conference on the Future of Europe is based on citizens, is a bottom-up approach, and aims to ensure and find ways, because we will all learn lessons from this experience, on how we can increase the participatory role of citizens in the European democracies. As we have plenty of democracies, there is one at the level of the EU, and then, of course, the democracies across each member state. So this is one first point I wanted to make, and I hope in the following discussion that I will listen more to comments and suggestions, even though I will be happy to take questions and answers to them. But very much the essence here is to listen, and it would be really welcome if ideas and comments, critical or not, suggestions for how to improve the EU in the world role will come up. The second point I wanted to make is that the Conference on the Future of Europe is characterized by being, if you want, a joint process. You have all the EU institutions being part of this process, led by the European Parliament, the Commission, and the European Council. They are all on board. They work with consensus. So it's not an initiative by one or another institution. And at the same time, what is very important, I think, here, and I think this joint approach tells it, is that the outcome, there's a commitment by all these institutions, by the whole European Union, that the outcome of the conference will be followed up. This is very important because this is not just a consultation in which the institutions and the European Union is going to listen. It's part of a process of the transformation of the European Union, and there is a commitment to follow up and implement decisions taken by the conference. A third very quick point I would like to make about the conference. I think you are all familiar, but still is good to state some facts, that it is in March this year, a few months ago, that a joint declaration launched the conference. It is also in April that the digital platform, quite an innovative idea for those who haven't really spent time with this. I really urge them to go and spend some time with this. There's a lot of new ways to interact and participate in this digital platform, multilingual and interactive. And it is in May that the formal inaugural, on the 9th of May, Europe's Day, that the formal inaugural event took place in Strasbourg with major political personalities from Europe launching it. And it is over the last couple of months that work has really started accelerating, and it is in autumn that really work will pick up with the European citizens panels and the plenaries, which will start working full time with the aim to reach an outcome sometime in spring 2022, basically in few months' time from now. So this is, if you want, an intense process, which is going to really become even more intense starting from September. Moving now to EU in the world and the external dimension of this debate, which I understand is the focus of our discussion. First, to mention that the conference has, as you probably know, 9 major areas, and EU in the world is one of them. So a distinct, if you want, policy area, subject, topic for the discussion for the future of Europe is the EU in the world, the role of the EU in the world. And could not be otherwise because, of course, we do not live alone in the world. And, of course, what we do has impact in the rest of the world, and what the rest of the world does has impact on us. So it is only natural that this is a major question. And I personally am not surprised that having seen now the first few months of the activity in the digital platform, where we have more than 1 million visitors and about 20,000 active participants, people who have registered with proposals and with events, we can see that the EU in the world is quite high in the priorities of those who engage with the digital platform so far, the European citizens. It is after the climate change and it is after the European democracies, which are the two, let's say, more trending, if you want, issues in the engagement in the digital platform. But it is after them and together with the economy, top priorities of the European citizens. And as I said, I'm not surprised for the simple reason I mentioned earlier on. I think it's very clear that what we do affects the world, and what the world does affects us. We live in an increasingly interdependent, interconnected world, and even if globalization seems to be stalling a little bit at the moment, still interdependence remains a defining feature of the world today, and the EU is an integral part of it. So EU in the world, it will be a major pillar of how we design the future of Europe and the adjustment to a challenge of the future. On a more practical way, the EU in the world, in the conference, covers a big number of areas. As you know, external action is not only traditional foreign policy diplomacy, it is also, of course, security and defense, but it is also, of course, trade, it is also neighborhood policy enlargement, and also development cooperation, humanitarian assistance. So it's a big area that covers the whole topic of EU in the world. The High Representative, your compatriot and our High Representative Vice President, the head of the European diplomacy, Josep Borrell, Javier Solana was a previous one, and is going to be associated with in the plenaries in all the discussions taking place about EU in the world, and the European External Action Service providing support to him in this role. So we are very actively engaged in all this process. Moving a little bit more in let's say substantive issues and the challenges we are facing. Again, as I said at the beginning, I will put on the table some issues, but this is really, if you want, elements framing the discussions rather than direction, because we really, not us only, the European Commission, the Parliament, the Council, I think governments want to listen to ideas. So, you know, the idea is not to reverse this by telling people what to think, but the idea of putting some elements on the table is more to try to frame the conversation so that it can be more organized, it can be more constructive. Now, one first point to make is that I think there's a great interest to see from the citizens answers and views both on what and on how. So what EU role in the world should be in terms of objectives, in terms of end state, where do we want to be, in what world we want to live, if you want, a few years from now, but also, and very importantly, how to get there. It's not sufficient to say we want to have a democracy spreading in the world, for example. It's about how to go about it. Shall we work with other democracies? Shall we engage authoritarians? How to engage others? What can be the ways to do it? And how the EU machinery should work in this direction. So the how is very important. And I stress this because there's also a very particular dimension of the how as an example, I'm using it, which is how effective can we be? How can we improve the effectiveness of how we work together? How we take decisions, how we implement decisions, how we maximize the use of our collective, if you want, influence and leverage we have as member states of the European Union. A second issue I would like to put on the table is the need to see how we can improve the coherence of the European Union external action. The question of the coherence has several dimensions, and again, some of them are very complicated. The first one is the dimension of how do you integrate internal and external policies. I mentioned earlier on that when we talk about the EU and the world, we talk about security, foreign policy, trade, development cooperation. But the world today is changing very fast. We all know that. Digital and technological issues, climate and energy transition, migration questions, all these have tremendous external dimensions. And all of this can only be effective if the internal and the external dimension is looked in a coherent way. So this is another challenge of how in this, if you want, more integrated world, we can deal with the EU role in the world, where external policies and internal policies come together and how can they come better together. The world has changed very much from the times that we could draw lines between domestic and foreign issues, if you want. Even the words, in my view, don't speak too much. Even the word foreign policy in a world of globalization, interconnectedness, perhaps, it doesn't capture the challenges. Another dimension of coherence is, of course, the question of resilience, the question of strategic autonomy, a word that, as you know, is quite a lot discussed over the last period, positively and negatively. The question is here, again, issues such as how to increase the resilience of the EU domestically very much passes through how do you act externally, including what kind of partnerships and engagement you have with other actors. So these are questions of how can we be better in addressing challenges like this. It's, again, the world is no longer a world in which we can take decisions based on protectionism, if you want, and seal our borders or seal our airspace and protect us from what others do. Climate change is such a classic, I think, example, but of course, issues like migration also the same. And another issue that I think we'll be called upon to discuss, and I think we will really interested to see views, is the whole question of multilateralism, another word which is used a lot, and an issue which is under great challenge, as we know lately. We see the United Nations, we see the World Trade Organization, we see the WHO being under a lot of strain and challenge lately. The question is, how can we, if you want, I used in inverted commas, reinvent cooperation, reinvent multilateral cooperation, reinvent partnerships, and with whom and how, in order to contribute to what we, I think, all of us in Europe think, because of our own success of multilateralism inside Europe, to make it the guiding principle again of international relations, and to deal with the challenges of multipolarity, which we all know are opposing to our way of thinking of multilateralism. To put it differently, we all know the issues. How can we go back to cooperation and rule-based relations, and as a way of defending to the increasing influence of power-based relations and nationalism and unilateralism as a way of conducting international relations? These are some of the thoughts I wanted to put on the table. We know all these issues are very much linked with broader trends, such as the challenge of globalization, and particularly how interdependence is weaponized today. All these are linked also with issues, bigger trends such as geopolitical rivalries, which are beyond us, but we'll have to deal with them. I'm talking about the tensions between the US and China, which will affect us, and how we position ourselves. It will be very important for us, but also for the hopefully for the evolution of this rivalry, and also about issues, other mega trends such as things that I think all of us have in our heart. We see it also in the response of the citizens so far, where democracy is very high on the agenda, together with climate, as I mentioned. The question that democracy is under pressure globally, question that freedoms and fundamental rights are under pressure. So these are issues that define the broader context. Some of the issues are put on the table that look for answers. So I hope I added things. I'm sure most of you, all of you, are very familiar with all these issues and you have your views, but what I tried to do was a bit to frame them, if you want, to put some things on the table, reflecting also the thinking and our concerns, our issues, if you want, here. So all yours for the follow-up of this discussion. Thank you for listening.
Well, thank you very much. Now I would try to sum up main ideas. I'm so sorry, I will have to speak in Spanish, but just 1 minute. I'm so sorry. Bueno, pues el señor Yanis del Servicio Europeo de Acción Exterior nos ha explicado la conferencia sobre el futuro de Europa, también ha explicado la importancia de escuchar a la ciudadanía, ha explicado las distintas formas de participación que ofrece la conferencia sobre el futuro de Europa, no solamente el plenario, la plataforma temática, y cómo dentro de esta plataforma temática la cuestión del papel de la Unión Europea en la escena internacional pues es sumamente atractivo para la ciudadanía. Ha mencionado la cantidad de participantes que ya se han entrado en la plataforma y a su vez el número elevado de comentarios respecto a la temática vinculada con el papel de la Unión Europea, lo cual muestra el interés de la ciudadanía para reforzar ese papel de la Unión Europea en la escena internacional. De igual modo, ha señalado que no solamente hay que destacar qué quiere alcanzar la Unión Europea, sino cómo alcanzar ese papel en el ámbito exterior. Para ello, bueno, pues ha señalado algunos aspectos, como por ejemplo la idea de coherencia, ¿no? La vinculación entre la dimensión interna y externa, que ya le hemos abordado en otras sesiones, también la necesidad de ser más resiliente, la noción de autonomía y, por supuesto, que justo le hemos abordado al principio de la mañana, cómo la Unión Europea tiene que renovar y promover ese multilateralismo. Bueno, pues a continuación abrimos el turno de preguntas, de manera que aquellas personas que quieran preguntar algo tienen que levantar la mano y hacemos lo mismo, 3 preguntas y que pueda responder. Muchas gracias. ¿Alguien quiere hacerle alguna pregunta? Aquí. Vamos a probar. Sí, pero es que sí. Ah, vale. Si no puedo hacer... the microphone doesn't work properly, so we have to use it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yanis, for your presentation. It was very interesting. I would like to add another layer to the discussion, if you don't mind. As you work for the European External Action Service, we have been discussing after the sessions that we have having these days about the cohesion of the foreign policy of the EU. And some of us, we were wondering if it would make sense that the EAS will also have some kind of action in trade or in other external policies further than security and foreign policy, the regular foreign policy. What do you think? Do you think it would be useful for the body to also incorporate these competences on trade or other external policies of the EU? Thank you.
Muchas gracias. ¿Hay alguna otra pregunta? So we only use that microphone, that's why you have to wait some minutes. I'm so sorry.
Mr. Yanis, thank you very much for your presentation. We have been discussing during these last days about what will be the best conclusions for the conference. We were thinking about, do we need to reform the treaties, or would it be enough to have a clear political declaration? What would it be better for the citizens to have a political declaration that is clear about the future priorities that the European Union and the member states are willing to cope with, to commit to? Or do we need a reform of the treaties? Is it the moment? And sorry for asking you directly the question, because we are just trying to push you in this direction, just because we have been discussing about this, and it's not so easy to get to a common position or to a common opinion. Thank you very much.
More questions? No more questions? Well, yes, one more question. It's about, well, more simple reforms. But once I observe the structure of the European External Action Service, and then I observe the international arena, I wonder, to what extent could it be necessary to update this structure? For example, you talk about multilateralism. Maybe to strengthen the DG, which is focused on multilateralism? Just a suggestion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so a few thoughts now on these comments and questions. I think I missed partly, there was some technical glitch for a second, the first question, but I think if I'm right, it was about how to improve the cohesion or coherence of different external actions, different aspects of external actions, if I'm right. I mentioned earlier on that indeed this is one of the issues that have been, if you want, discussed and in the minds of people for years. I say this to say that this is a relatively old question that still is relevant because the world keeps on changing and making even more the demand for greater coherence ever more urgent, if you want. So it's an issue that we have been dealing with, but it's an issue that we need to continue, I think, as Europeans, to see how we can do better. And in a way, this is, I think, a challenge that all governments in Europe have, national governments, how to bring together in a coherent way what different ministers do, which, let's say, on issues on the economy can clash sometimes. If one minister is taking a measure which is more protectionist, while the other is taking measures which is more towards the direction of openness, this clash. So, of course, in a way, you will say this is why you have a government, that's why you have a prime minister who brings together the different views. But what I'm saying is that indeed, in a world which is very interdependent, quite integrated, and which moves fast, the need to bring together, to find ways also institutionally that policies interact with each other is essential. The European Commission over the last few years has basically developed what you call the cluster of commissioners dealing with external issues who meet regularly. So you have commissioners for trade, assistance, neighborhood, of course, chaired by the High Representative and Vice President for the EU foreign policy and security policy. So the realization is there, the awareness is there, the need to work what became very clear in the case of the early stages of the response, the external response to COVID crisis, what we call the Team Europe approach. It's really in the minds of people here as the right model. So working together, putting all the instruments together, all the tools together, the policies being cohesive. For this, the High Representative has an important role. Also because at the same time, as High Representative, he brings the member states' views and perspectives on the table. So that's the idea, if you want, of the double hatting role of the High Representative and Vice President that the Lisbon Treaty is set up. So he coordinates inside the Commission all those who have an important external role, coordinates the EU member states' perspectives and roles, hopefully contributing that the different dimensions of external action are coherent and effective. So again, the realization is there, the challenge is there. It may be, and that is why I said earlier on, we need ideas on how to improve this. It will be one of the challenges. So I think one of the outcomes of the conference, when we talk about in this area, would be exactly suggestions on how to further integrate the different dimensions of foreign policy. As I mentioned earlier on, for me, I think, and for many, integrating the internal dimensions will be equally important, because we mentioned some of these external dimensions, but then we have climate and the energy transition. Then we have the whole technology, and the Foreign Affairs Council of the Foreign Ministers in July, just 2 weeks ago, held a first time a meeting on the geopolitics of technology and asked the European External Action Service together, of course, with the Commission, member states, to work now to develop a clearer direction on how technology and foreign policy should interact, because ultimately, as many people argue, increasingly technological is geopolitical, and the geopolitical distribution of power of the future will depend a lot on how our policies on technology will develop, not only in terms of investing on technological development, innovation, and so on, but also on how we work on setting standards regionally and globally on future technologies like artificial intelligence, and also about how do we protect our own technological sovereignty, if you want. So I would put this to the coherence of the external policies and the coherence of external with internal as part of one big challenge, and an ongoing challenge, because even if we come up with some good ideas from the Conference on the Future of Europe, certainly we will need to go on updating, because this is, if you want, a never-ending challenge. On the question of the, I will go now to the third question, the third issue about, which is related, about updating the structures, which is your question, and you put multilateralism as one of the examples. First of all, the idea of reforming our structures is again an ongoing process. The conference is going to bring another impetus with new ideas. But to give you an idea, the European External Action Service this 1st of January reached 10 years. So it's a 10-year-old boy, if you want, or girl. This was an opportunity to reflect on the past and also to think about changes. And some of these changes, under the leadership of the Secretary General and with the support of the High Representative, are on the way. We're going to have a new organigram, some new structures. And this is not just bureaucratic things, because all the discussions are about how the structures can better reflect the real challenges and opportunities that we have on policy level in order to help be stronger and more effective. So, for example, we are strengthening the teams that are dealing with the climate and energy transitions, and the teams that are dealing with digital and new technologies. Exactly because these are two of the new frontiers, if you want, new, not so new, two of the major, I use in inverted commas, battlegrounds in today's geopolitics. So, which will define how not only EU in the world develops, but how the whole world develops. So these adjustments are happening. Multilateralism, as you mentioned, is one of these key areas, and actually in the new structures, the way it will be adjusted. Also, there is greater emphasis now on all these areas that are critical to multilateral cooperation. Democracy is one of them. You all know, for example, that one of the first pledges of John Biden as a new president was to host a summit for democracies. And there are different debates about it and different views, how this will develop. So our structures are adjusting, but again, I emphasize, this is a never-ending challenge. So we will need more ideas on how to do better. And there are governments, there are businesses, there are experts, academics, who have ideas because they have worked on research or they have practiced some of new institutional arrangements. So this is where I think some of these ideas, I hope they will come. Finally, on the question of the easy question, the reform, treaty change or not. You don't expect me to have to give you an answer. And even if I do, it will be my personal answer, so it will be purely personal, so it doesn't really matter that much. I'm giving you a couple of thoughts. First of all, I understand that legally there is no impediment to treaty reforms, meaning it's an open-ended process, if you want. There are different views in the institutions, in governments, of course. And there have been also governments who have been openly saying that there should be no treaty changes. But I think that this is open, which means what, in my view? It means that this will be determined in the process. It will be determined in the process of consultations. It will be very much up to the citizens in different ways making proposals. And not only citizens in their individual capacity, but organized in organizations that participate. The regional governments and chambers of commerces and representatives of the professional sector, which, as you know, also participate in an organized way in the conference. So this is going to be, I think, a collective process. And we will see where we are when we get closer to the end. This is as much as I can say. The last point on this I would like to add, and also when it comes to the EU foreign policy, is that I think there is great agreement, at least among experts, and this is why non-experts will be very useful, and people who come out from different perspectives and different experiences, but diplomats, if you want, that's what I call experts. I think there's great agreement that there is a lot, really a lot that can be done within the treaties. This doesn't mean that there may be no need for treaties changes. If this is the agreement, this is, can also go down this path. But what I'm saying is that I think there is a lot that can be done within the treaties in terms of increasing the effectiveness, for example, of decision-making, or increasing the coherence of implementation. A lot of this really relies on political will, of governments, relies on attitudes. If you want, issues such as solidarity, which for me are at the heart of all this project. Solidarity as an essential element of all what the European Union is doing if it is to be effective. A lot of elements of increasing solidarity, I don't think they require treaty changes today. They may be enhanced by treaty changes, but a lot relies today on political will and on attitudes. And if there is any change I have seen in my professional career and engagement, because before working for the European Union, I was also engaged in European issues, like many of you from student and beyond. A lot that has changed is that there is a challenge to solidarity in practical terms, because solidarity is not, it's easy all of us to agree on solidarity. It is on specific decisions and specific cases in practical ways that solidarity can develop. And these are issues that we can find mechanisms to increase solidarity already under the current, I think, institutional framework. So I just gave an idea of whether we'll go down the path of changing treaties or not. I think the question remains that there's so much we can do even without, and therefore the one should not be an obstacle to the other, in my view.
Thank you very much for your response. ¿Más preguntas? No? I have one more question, and it's about, you talk about the platform, and I really would like to know which is the trendy topic. I mean, which is the most appealing aspect that most of the citizens want to include when they think about how to strengthen the role of the European Union at international level. Thank you very much.
Quickly on this, there is a team monitoring the development of the platform and drawing conclusions all the time. And they are using also all sorts of artificial intelligence ways to analyze things which are beyond my comprehension. I can only see the results. And I think we are at the beginning of the process, as I mentioned. I think we really hope that they will pick up in autumn and in the winter when we will start having the citizens panels and the plenaries taking place, the one close to each other. From what I see so far, the leading issue in terms of contributions, in terms of registration and proposals made by citizens, is climate, followed very closely by the whole issue of democracy in Europe. Now, what I was seeing is that when it comes to endorsement, which is a different endorsement of the various proposals, again, because as we said, it's interactive, this platform, democracy is ahead. So it seems there is these two issues, and in different ways, I think, are leading the concerns and preoccupations of European citizens. The two other issues that are following, a little bit further down in terms of numbers, but enough to be able to say there are two different categories, if you want, with the two leading the pack, climate and democracy. The other two is the economy and the EU in the world. So just to tell you, and you will see that if you go to you have to do your own analysis, but you will see the numbers. So I'm basically facilitating it because it's done by others. But you will see that, interestingly, an issue which is not so high up is health. It's interesting because we all live an extraordinary experience where health is, let's say, the context of this experience. We will see. There are different speculations so far, perhaps human optimism that this is just a parenthesis and we'll get out of it, and while the other issues such as climate are there, and they are going to be there beyond the current pandemic. But just this, I gave you some thoughts about the priorities. Yes, at the moment we haven't reached a level of plenaries to see the citizens and to have from this perspective. I think in autumn we will see more clearly the trends. At the moment, these trends are only reflected in the digital platform.
Well, ¿no hay más preguntas? Well, many thanks for your effort and interest, and thank you very much. It was very interesting to bring the European External Action Service to this seminar. So thank you very much, and that's all.
Thank you also, and have a nice day there and stay safe.